homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm, or welcome back. We're here for our early July garden tour. Let's get started. So this old stock tank that we planted with flowers this year has really been fun. So this is, sorry about the neighbor's dog losing its mind. This is bachelor button, pink bachelor button. And they have been putting on quite the show, really quite lovely. And then lots of calendula. I have two different varieties here. This one is called Flashback. And the lighter colored one was from a seed swap, and it was supposed to be an ivory. And most of them are this kind of pale yellow with a brown center. Although I do have some in a different planter where the center is a light color instead of a dark color. And that's been kind of fun. And I'm sure that's just random genetics from it crossing. This is the perennial chamomile, which I believe is the Roman chamomile. And it is just starting to bloom in here. But you can see we've got a bunch of it coming. And then this is golden marguerite, and it hasn't gotten going yet. But this is one plant. So it's been very happy in this bed, and these have little yellow daisy flowers and very, very popular with beneficial insects. So expecting good things to come of that very soon. This is an anise hyssop that is really good for tea. It has a little bit of an anise flavor to it. It's in the mint family, so it has that square stem. There's one of those in here. And then this one, this is a true hyssop, so related, also square stem mint family. I've never grown this before, and this is also medicinal, but it's just starting to bloom with these tiny little blue flowers. And I have this in a couple of different places in the yard, so kind of fun. Looks a little bit weedy, but the flowers are quite pretty. And I need to make some tea out of that and give it a try. And then in the back part of this bed, in the front here, this is foxglove. And these plants are happy. These are perennial, and they're probably not going to actually put up a flower stalk this year, but they're happy and doing well. I have some echinacea in here that are getting a little overshadowed because I've got too many tall things in the rest of this bed. And then behind the zinnia, there are Sahara Rudbeckia. So those are trying to get a foothold with all of the calendula taking over. I knew I put too many things in this bed, but I couldn't resist. And that calendula, I'll probably tear out that calendula here in a couple of weeks so that Rudbeckia gets a lot more sun. And then we have the zinnias that I saved seed from some of the floret zinnias. And so we've got some very nice zinnias coming in here. This is the first flower on a lot of these. And then once we pick these and deadhead them, we'll have lots and lots of side shoots. So lots of fun, really pretty little zinnias coming in here. And then everything outside of this bed, all of this calendula and the poppy that's in here, this is all volunteer. And I am gonna tear all of this out, but I couldn't resist leaving it until I really needed to be able to get through here, and it's been so pretty. And interestingly, some of the calendula that's in here, these are closing up for the night, so they've gotten smaller. But I think this was called Strawberry Blonde, and I grew it last year, and I really didn't love it last year. And for some reason this year, I am completely enamored with it. So I don't know if it crossed and it's got a better color combination than it did last year, but I'm loving this one this year. And so I'm happy there's quite a bit of that in there. It's very, very pretty. This is Signet Marigold in here that is doing quite well. These are edible. It's a small marigold, and I mean, so pretty. I mean, come on, just gorgeous. So that's been really fun as well. And then in terms of the actual garden beds, let's come around here. But this bed is potatoes on the very end. So right here is potatoes. There's 4 potatoes in there. It was a variety that I'm not growing potatoes actively this year except for this little tiny bed. But this was a variety that's very hard to get a hold of, and so I wanted to keep it going. On the very end here, I have planted some flowers. They're not ready to bloom yet, and there's a couple of echinacea in there that I'm not sure they're going to make it. They're not super happy there. And the I had a hibiscus in here that almost immediately died from transplanting. And it could be because this is a walnut tree. And so even though I've done my best to keep the walnut leaves and the walnuts themselves out of these beds, I have a feeling that the soil might be contaminated, and walnuts have a chemical in them that is allopathic. And so it makes other things not grow. And so I have a feeling that that hibiscus was very sensitive to that, and that's why it conked out. Hard to say. But the rest of this bed is herbs, and so I have parsley in here, and I've been harvesting handfuls of parsley for a variety of things, including smoothies. I have a recipe for an immune-boosting smoothie that's apple and kale and lemon and ginger and parsley. I'll put a link to that below if you guys want to see it. But we've been drinking those on a fairly regular basis, and so I've been harvesting handfuls of parsley for that, and that's been great. Behind that is some marjoram, which is a little bit like an oregano, but a little bit more floral. And then behind that is za'atar, which is sort of like a wild thyme or a wild oregano. And I harvest those two for some of the spice mixes that I do. And then the rest of this bed is mostly poppies, and these are breadseed poppies. And I'll put some pictures up. I've taken quite a few pictures. At this point, they're mostly done blooming, but I harvest the actual poppy seeds for, classic poppy seed cake and things like that. But we've got some very nice poppy seed heads on here. And then this is quinoa. It looks like lamb's quarter, but it's actually quinoa. And so those are the seed heads for the quinoa. So I'm excited to have a little bit of a harvest of that. That's kind of fun. I did tear out right here on this bed. There was a huge California poppy that went all the way around this corner. It was just the actual base of the plant was right here, but it went all the way around this corner and all the way over to here. And it was just getting to the point where this was getting kind of ridiculous. And so I yanked out a giant chunk of that and threw it under one of my almond trees. So I'm hoping there'll be some seed in there and that it will reseed under my almonds. That would be nice. Also in this herb bed, along with the quinoa and the poppies, I've got dill. And I've harvested quite a bit of the fronds on this, but I've still got the seed coming in. And here's obviously dill fronds as well. It's worth planting dill. Even I'm not a huge dill person. I don't eat a lot of it, but it is so pretty. I love the way it looks. It's just visually stunning and very, very popular with lots and lots of bees and other insects. And so I always have a little bit around just for that. And then kind of falling over, and I've torn out some of the other ones, is borage that is just reseeded with abandon, and I have a ton of it in other places. And so I did tear out a couple of the borage that were in this bed just because, again, I was getting to the point where I couldn't get through here, and I still can't get through here. But these poppies are going to be done fairly soon. I'm not sure what I'm going to plant in there later. And then backing up so that you can see the whole thing. This is an arch trellis, a cattle panel arch trellis. And on the bottom on both sides are a Japanese variety of cucumber that I just love. And I've harvested about 10 cucumbers out of here so far. So they are starting to produce, and they're very actively climbing up this beautiful trellis. And it's going to get to the point where I'm going to have to tear some other things out because it's going to be hard to walk through here when this really gets going. But you can see I've got cucumbers. In fact, that one is ready to come out. I've got cucumbers down below here that are coming in. So that's really fun. Here's another one right here. And this variety of cucumber does not get bitter in the heat, and it produces all the way through the season. So it is just my favorite cucumber for sure because it just keeps coming. And I will probably sell a lot of these. I don't eat a ton of cucumbers. I do have a neighbor who eats them like apples, and she does me a lot of favors in terms of helping take care of animals and things when we're traveling. And so I will load her up with cucumbers as partial payment for some of that work that she does for me. Here's a dill plant that I cut the tops off of because it was still in pots and it had gone to seed. And I was hoping that if I cut the tops off, I would get some more side growth and get a bushier plant where I could harvest more of the fronds. Usually once it starts to go to seed, the fronds kind of die back, as you can see here. See how this is all dried out? That's kind of typical once it goes to seed. So we'll see what happens. The rest of this bed is peppers. I have 6 Carmen peppers in here, and I just recently added some old chicken manure compost into this bed because things were just kind of putzing along. I wasn't getting a ton of active growth here. That could be shade, no kidding. But I wanted to give them a little bit more of a nutritional boost, and this bed hadn't really been amended. But I've got 6 Carmens, which are a sweet bullhorn style pepper. I've got a couple of shishitos, and we've harvested a handful of shishitos off of here. You can see those are starting to form. Not sure what's causing these holes. This could be slugs, it could be grasshoppers. We're starting to see a lot of grasshoppers too. But shishitos, and then some Korean peppers and a bunch of poblanos. And there was supposed to be a couple of jalapenos in here, and I think that somehow there was a seed mix-up because the 2 that are marked jalapeno look like poblano. And so I'm kind of assuming those are actually poblano. And so I ended up getting a deal on a couple of jalapenos and planted them in a different spot. Coming around to the other side of this other bed, this is chamomile, the German chamomile that is an annual. I had a few of them that I started from seed this year, and I just love tucking them into corners. These are all kind of done for the night, but they were so pretty earlier today, just a million little white daisy flowers. And I harvested a little bit of this for tea, but mostly I just really enjoy the plant. I think it's so pretty tucked into a corner. I have 4 celery plants in here. Here's more of the borage. This is just not even in a bed. This is just strictly volunteer. And I just, when it gets to be too big and too much, I just yank it out by the handfuls. But there's always a little borage around and covered in bees. They love it. This is some reseeded nigella, the actual nigella that you use in culinary applications. So related to love and a mist, but actually the Indian nigella. And so I've got some of that reseeded from last year. And then the rest of this bed is leeks. And they're slowly coming along. My onions did not grow very fast this year. So leeks in here. A couple of green onions over on the far side. I had terrible germination on that, so I only have a couple. A couple of red salvia flowers. This was a borage right here that was huge and kind of starting to shade out the leeks, and so I tore it out, and then I had a hole, and so I had a couple of red salvias that I had started from seed that really needed to go someplace, and so they got tucked into that bed. There's been a lot of swapping out going on in the last month or so. And then the rest of this bed is green beans, 3 different varieties of green beans. I also planted some soybeans in here, and I don't think a single one of them came up. So this is strictly green beans. The ones closest to me are Jade, and then there's Maxabelle and Providence, I think, are the other 2 that are in here. And the Jade, for whatever reason, I was really excited to try that. I've seen that recommended a lot. Not great germination on the Jade, not nearly as well as the other 2. The other 2 were saved seeds. The Jade seed was store-bought seed. And so I don't know if the seed wasn't great or if it's just way more attractive to things like slugs and pillbugs and they just came up and then immediately got eaten, which is certainly possible. This bed was garlic, but I have now harvested all of the garlic. I usually end up pulling my garlic out around the 1st of July. And then on the corner here, this was where I had some celery last year. And this celery is a biannual, meaning that it goes to seed in its 2nd year. And so it's getting ready to go to seed. And I didn't need this space, and I thought it would be really fun to just let the bees and the insects have it. And then I'll collect a whole bunch of celery seed from this, and I'll have celery seed to make my own celery salt and to sell. And so we'll just let those go to seed, and we'll harvest all of that seed. And then tucked in between those 2 plants, and I just harvested a ton off of it, is a thyme. And it looks terrible right now because I cut it way back. But that was covered in flowers and covered with bees for about a month before I decided to give it a trim. Here's another chamomile tucked in and growing through a fence line. This is a volunteer poppy that's almost done that I'll tear out as soon as it's finished blooming. And then on the end of this bed, I don't have anything on this trellis right now, but this is the 2 jalapenos that I put in the ground because evidently I don't have jalapenos, and so I bought a couple of on sale, deep discount. And then on the very end of this bed, just because I needed a place to put it, this is eucalyptus. And so kind of fun. And it's in this climate, it will be an annual, but I love the smell of it, and I'll just pick it and dry it as it gets big. And just a fun thing to start from seed. This is what they call, I think they call this silver dollar eucalyptus. but it smells amazing. And it's going to get way bigger and way happier now that that garlic is out of the bed, because the garlic was kind of shadowing it out. In the bed next to that one, the other side of this trellis, this is Brassicas. And so we have a red Russian kale. And again, this has been going into smoothies and various other things. And so really delicious early in the year. A couple of red Russian kales in here. I particularly like this variety. And then this is a lacinato style. And look at how chewed on this is. I think there was a cabbage moth that laid eggs, and then the larvae have been in here just having an absolute munched field day. And evidently they like this one better than they like the other one, because the other one isn't really chewed on, but this has been very chewed on. I have since sprayed this with something called Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a bacteria that when caterpillars eat it, it messes up their ability to feed and they die, and it is pretty much harmless to everything that isn't a caterpillar. And so it's a very nice organic spray. We're just starting to see a little bit of aphid. See how that's curled up? That's usually what happens when you start getting aphid in things. Here's another really good example. Yep, and if we, it's gonna be hard to see this, but in there are tons and tons of aphids. And so again, sprayed this along with Bacillus thuringiensis. I sprayed this with some pyrethrin in the hopes of dealing with this, but I deal with this every single year. Aphids are always a problem as we get into the heat of summer on my brassicas, and I generally fight them and try to get through the summer, and then by the fall I've just given up. I've harvested as much kale as I want, and I let the rest of it go. There's a couple of lettuce plants in here starting to go to seed that were actually overwintered, and then I harvested a bunch, and then they've sent up a seed stock, and I figure they can just reseed there as much as they want. And then there were 4 cabbages in here. There is 1 left. I did harvest some beautiful cabbage out of here. So now I've got this little bit of space here I'm not sure what I'm going to do with. And in this bed, where I had some room, these are okra. And late in the season, we're not really great climate for okra. It doesn't do super well here, but it loves heat. And so there's not much point in planting it early. I've tried and nothing happens because it's very unhappy until it gets hot. And so I just threw some seeds directly in the ground, and they did just recently come up. So we'll see if we manage to pull off okra here. I can't remember the variety this year. It's a new one. I'll put it on the screen. And then the other peppers, I've got a couple of eggplants in this bed. And I'm using the cabbage leaves as mulch, so that's what you're seeing down there. And then the other peppers here, most peppers that we grow are Capsicum annum, and then there's actually 3 or 4 other different varieties of species, same genus, different species. One of them is Capsicum chinensis, and one of the other ones is Capsicum bactum, and I have Bactum and chinensis in this bed. And so one of these is Sugar Rush Peach, and one of them is Yellow Amarillo, so Peruvian pepper. And it's interesting to see the difference in the growth. Like, these are so much more bushy than the other bed that has the annums in it. So I'm not sure if that's just better nutrition in this bed or what, but for whatever reason, these plants were super leggy and really needed to go in the ground. And then once they got planted, they bushed out a ton. I did not pinch these back. This is all just growth. So interesting to see how they're dealing with stuff versus the other plants, the other peppers that were started at the exact same time. Yet another chamomile tucked into a corner. This one was from a pot. The one down here actually was a reseed from an aisle, and I just dug it up and put it in this corner. So I have a couple in here, and we're not going to be able to see this because we're running out of light. Maybe we can. This was mostly lettuce earlier in the season, and now I have carrots. So I am a big believer. A lot of people think that you should plant carrots super early, and then it's a giant nightmare to try to get it to germinate. And in my opinion, if you just wait and do carrots in the summer, germination is in less than a week. So all these little baby carrots that are in here, and there's a bunch of them right over here. Hopefully you guys can see that. Those were all carrots that came up within a week, just super fast. And then the other half of this bed, there's a parsley over there that was supposed to be a celery, and then I started looking at it and I was like, I don't think that's a celery, it's a parsley. So that got moved. So one other parsley plant, and then I have beets in the rest of this bed. And I need to reseed a few spots where I didn't get a lot of germination, but you can see there are beets coming up in here. And so we'll have a nice fall crop of beets. And I think for that garlic bed that I was showing you earlier, I need to replace some of the drip line in here, but I'm going to put fall brassicas, so fall broccoli, cabbage, that kind of thing, into that bed. So that's what's going to go in there to fill that empty bed now that we've taken the garlic out. This is a sprouting broccoli, and it is done. We've harvested everything we're going to get off of this, and it's time to take these plants out. They did a nice little production. We got a good harvest off of them, but they're finished for the year. And I'm not sure what I'm going to tuck into this corner. I have an asparagus on the other side of this bed that's really bushy, and so it creates some shade. And then right here we have this giant black walnut that creates a lot of shade. It doesn't overhang the beds, but there's a lot of shade in there. And so it's a little tricky. Maybe I'll try some summer lettuce and see if I get it to survive the heat and go into the fall. Not really sure what I'm going to do with the little spot right there. But yeah, things are coming along. I have a kitty meowing at me. What are you meowing about? Well, come on. Come on. Come see me. What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, you're so loud. Hi, buddy. He's so complaining. I don't know why he's so complaining. So here's the rest of the annum pepper bed. You can see how not bushy these are compared to the other ones. I did just pick some poblanos off of here that had gotten sunburned, and we put them into a taco, which was nice. And I do have some really nice fruit coming in here. Like, look at this guy. I don't know if you could, yeah, you can still see that. Look at that nice poblano. So I've got some beautiful fruit coming in, but very different growth style. It's just fun to see that with the different species. And then I'm not going to go in depth here. My husband and I are going to tie this up tomorrow. I'm going to recruit him. But this is the tomato bed. And so there are a total of 8 tomatoes in here, and they are now all the way up. They're taller than I am, so they're probably up to 5 feet. The 2 on the end here are cherry tomatoes, and I am getting small handfuls of cherries, so they're just starting to come in. We don't usually get a big flush of ripe tomatoes until August, and so it's only the 5th of July. We've got a ways to go. But I'm trying a new trellising method this year where I've got T-posts on the ends, and I'm tying things up. And you can see the rope tie here, and you kind of weave things in and out, but things have gotten really heavy, and I need to get in there and do a second row, because at this point, bad things are happening, so we need to get on that. But that's what the perennial garden is looking like on the 5th of July. So things are coming along rather nicely, and I'm excited for fresh green beans. I'm super excited for all of the flowers. And we're totally out of light at this point. I don't know if you can see, my porch light is on, and we have lost, the camera's gonna compensate, but the sun's going down. We have lost our light for the night. Breast cancer update, if you're curious, I have surgery on the 22nd of July to get the lumpectomy, and then from there we'll find out additional treatments. So if you're wondering what's happening with that, it's a very slow, tedious process, but that will be happening on the 22nd, and I am very grateful to get that done, because I would really like to have this small tumor out of my body as soon as possible. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week.